A spiritual is a category of devotional song that is most frequently connected to the enslavement of African Americans in the American South. In the latter few decades of the 18th century, up to the abolition of legalized slavery in the 1860s, the songs became increasingly popular. The African American spiritual, often known as the Negro Spiritual, is one of the most popular and important genres of American folk music. Famous spirituals include Wallis Willis's Swing Low, Dear Chariot and Deep Down in My Heart. Ephesians 5:19, which reads, "Speaking to yourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual melodies, singing and making music in your heart to the Lord," is where the word spiritual originates. The informal gatherings of African slaves in praise houses and outside events known as brush arbor meetings, bush meetings, or camp meetings in the 18th century are where the form first emerged. Participants would sing, chant, dance, and occasionally go into blissful trances during the gatherings. The ring scream, a circling dance performed by early plantation slaves to chant and hand clapping, is another source of inspiration for spirituals. Jesus Leads Me All the Way, a spiritual performed in this manner by Reverend Goodwin and the Zion Methodist Church congregation, was captured by Henrietta Yurchenko in 1970. In Africa, music had always played a significant role in daily life and significant life events. However, because they viewed the slaves' African-influenced form of worship as pagan and barbaric, the white colonists of North America were worried and disapproved of them. The meetings had to be held covertly as a result of being frequently forbidden. In the 17th century, Christianity was first made known to the African population in the American colonies. The initial adoption of the faith was rather slow. However, the slave population found biblical tales that had similarities to their own life to be fascinating and produced spirituals that told stories about biblical figures like Daniel and Moses. Slaves adapted Africanized Christianity, and spirituals became a means of expressing the community's new faith as well as its sufferings and hopes. In call, response spirituals, a leader improvises a line of text, and a chorus of vocalists delivers a strong refrain in unison. The vocal style was characterized by a variety of freeform rhythms, turns, and slides that made it difficult for early spiritual publishers to adequately record them. A lot of spirituals, also referred to as sorrow songs, are tense, sluggish, and depressing. The difficulties of the slaves are described in songs like "Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child" and "Nobody Knows the Trouble I've Seen," which also identify Jesus Christ's suffering. Some spirituals are happier than others. These quick, rhythmic songs, also referred to as jubilees or camp meeting songs, frequently syncopate. "Fare You Well" and "Rocky My Soul" are two examples. Spirituals are sometimes perceived as formalized protest songs, with songs like Wallis Willis's "Steal Away to Jesus" being seen as calls to flee slavery by some observers. It is frequently hypothesized that songs like "I Received My Ticket" may have been a code for escape because the Underground Railroad of the mid-19th century employed vocabulary from railroads as a secret language for guiding slaves to freedom. Since helping slaves to freedom was against the law, concrete evidence is elusive. "Go Down, Moses," a spiritual that Harriet Tubman used to introduce herself to slaves who might desire to move north, was undoubtedly employed as a code for freedom. As a former slave and abolitionist, Frederick Douglass described singing spirituals while he was a bondman in his book My Bondage and My Freedom, 1855. Our repeated singing of "O Canaan, Sweet Canaan, I Am Bound for the Land of Canaan" may have contained more than just a hope of entering heaven, according to a perceptive observer. The North was our Canaan and where we intended to arrive. The 1860s saw the beginning of a wider interest in spirituals because of the release of collections of spirituals. Global interest in the musical style was spurred in the 1870s by the formation of the Jubilee Singers, a chorus made up of former slaves from Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. Spirituals were performed in concert as part of the group's extended traveling schedule in the US and Europe, which was highly welcomed by audiences. The performances of the Fisk University singers persuaded many that the spiritual heritage should be preserved, even though several African Americans at the time connected it with slavery and were not excited about keeping it alive. As groups all around the nation began to imitate the Jubilee Singers, a concert hall tradition of singing this song was born and has endured to this day. One of the earliest groups to compete with the Jubilee Singers was the Hampton Singers of Hampton Institute, which is now Hampton University in Hampton, Virginia. Founded in 1873, the ensemble gained recognition on a global scale in the early and middle decades of the 20th century, led by its stalwart conductor R. Nathaniel Dett. Dett was renowned for both his creative compositions based on spirituals and his passionate arrangements of spirituals, in addition to his visionary conducting skills. Spirituals have been a cappella arranged for choruses in the 20th century by such renowned composers as Moses Hogan, Roland Carter, Chester Hairston, Brazil Dennard, and Wendell Whalum, moving the musical genre beyond its traditional folk song roots. The efforts of composers like Henry T. Burleigh, who produced extensively performed piano, voice arrangements of spirituals in the early 20th century for solo classical vocalists, furthered the appearance of spirituals on the concert hall stage. To get the sheet music for Burleigh's arrangement of the spiritual A Balm in Gilead, click the provided link. The 1924 version of Go Down Moses by Marian Anderson was adapted from a Burleigh arrangement. The American Folklife Center collections at the Library of Congress contain a large number of recordings of these country spirituals that were made between 1933 and 1942. The collection contains gems like Run Old Jeremiah, a ring shout from Jennings, Alabama, recorded by J. W. Brown Anna Coleman in 1934, which has a train-like accompaniment of stamping feet, and Eli You Can't Stand, a spiritual supported by hand-clapping with lead singing by Willis Proctor, recorded on St. Simon's Island, Georgia, in 1959. This presentation makes several field recordings of spirituals accessible online, including the earliest known recording of Come By Here, or Kumbaya, sung by H. Wiley and captured by folklorist Robert Winslow Gordon on a wax cylinder in 1926. The middle of this recording is inaudible, probably due to the deterioration of the cylinder. This audio is a curator talk by folklorist Stephen Winnick on Kumbaya. The folk hymn, the religious ballad, and the camp meeting spiritual all fall under the umbrella of the white spiritual genre, while being much less widely known than its black spiritual cousin. White spirituals and African American spirituals have certain melodic similarities, symbolism, and shared ancestry. Field recordist Willis James captured the Lincoln Park Singers playing I'll Fly Away, a song written by white composer Albert E. Brumley, in 1943. This field recording shows how white and black spirituals are related. When George Pullen Jackson, a professor of German at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, wrote the book White Spirituals in the Southern Uplands in the 1930s, the genre of white spirituals came to light, 1933. The book was the first of several studies that brought attention to the fact that white spirituals existed in both their oral and written versions, the latter of which could be found in the shape, note tune books of rural areas. At various times in the 20th and early 21st centuries, spirituals have been important as platforms for protest. Spirituals and gospel songs aided civil rights activists' work during the 1950s and 1960s civil rights movement. Old spirituals were frequently converted into the liberation songs of the day, such as Oh, Freedom and Eyes on the Prize. The band Reverb performs both of these songs in a video of their 2007 concert at the Library of Congress. The anthem for the movement, We Shall Overcome, combined the spiritual I'll Be All Right with the gospel song I'll Overcome Someday. Spiritual inspired freedom anthems have also contributed to defining democratic efforts in many other nations, including South Africa, China, Eastern Europe, and Russia. Some of today's top pop performers still use the spiritual legacy as inspiration when writing fresh protest songs. The Redemption Song by Bob Marley and Billy Bragg are two examples of Sing Their Hearts Homeward. Do you like this video? Give your response in our comments section below, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for future updates.